That's why I believe in you, because that is the greatest purpose. It's to love. Honest. It sounds corny, whatever you want to say. I don't care. I love people because there is freedom and power in loving people.
Hello, all you positive heads out there. Thanks for tuning your beautiful brainwaves into another episode of the Positive Head Podcast, where we are firmly convinced that creating success and happiness is rooted in understanding the ultimate nature of reality and the fact that as human beings, we are all immensely powerful fractals of the one and only source consciousness, which creates and animates all things. Now, of course, understanding this powerful truth is one thing. Applying this incredibly empowering wisdom to everyday life, well, that's another, which is exactly why we provide you with a fresh serving of soul food for thought 5 days a week to help constantly remind you of what matters most. You are it. And I'm your host, Brandon Beecham. I'm the one who will be here with you each and every Wednesday, interviewing a different consciousness changemaker that is also out there working tirelessly to help catalyze change and expand awareness all across Spaceship Earth. On the other 4 weekdays, you can hear me discussing topics such as my favorite thought-provoking quotes, reading and discussing wisdom from empowering books, playing clips from various inspirational spiritual teachers, sharing a bit of mysterious news, taking questions from the audience, and essentially digging into any other mind-expansive topics that will help keep your soul fed by tuning you into positive vibrations on a consistent basis. And you guys have heard me say that if I ever run ads on the show, it will only be with a company that I fully support because I believe their intention is to make a positive difference in the world. Well, I'm pleased to announce that day has arrived and that this episode of the Positive Head Podcast is being brought to you thanks to the support of Gaia. If you're not familiar, Gaia is the go-to source for streaming consciousness content online. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. All right, all you positive heads. I expect this week's interview episode to flow extremely smoothly because I have Art of Flow coach Justin Faerman here with me on the show. Justin is a visionary change agent, entrepreneur, and healer dedicated to evolving global consciousness. Hey there, Justin. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, how's it going, Brandon? Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, likewise. Been looking forward to this for quite some time. You know, right before we got set up to start today, I was like, hold on, where did I originally get introduced to you through? Was it Mark England?
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it was Mark, the spellcaster extraordinaire. Yeah. Some of you guys may remember who've been listening to the show for a long time. He was one of my first interviews, founder of Procabulary. Excellent. I highly recommend you guys checking that podcast out and checking out his work with Procabulary, you know, all about spelling, right? How you're casting spells and how you're using your words. And he's definitely knows what he's talking about.
Yeah. Mark's total character. He's a genius. I love him.
Yeah, he's great. All right. So jumping right in with you, I'm going to start off. I always start in with the same question and end with the same question. You're in an elevator. The girl next to you looks over and says, "What's your passion?" You got 10 floors to answer. What do you say?
What do I say? My passion is really exploring the limits of consciousness and really to kind of push the edges of human potential and to really see what's possible and to really play with reality like it's, a set of Legos or something like that.
That's funny. I was just making a list of my intentions to manifest in the new year, because we're still, as we record this, it's still first week and a half into 2017, and that was a big part of what I put. Being able to play with the tools and to be able to manifest more and have a lot of fun. Learning how to dive deeper into that whole realm. So I have no doubt this conversation is going to be very interesting. So great answer. So why don't you start off telling us a little bit about your story, where you come from, how'd you end up, down this path of consciousness and healing?
Yeah, that's a good question. I got onto the path I was kind of, I was joking around when you asked me if I was ready before the podcast. I said I was born ready. And I feel like that's actually pretty true because when I was really young, I was like pretty deep into, exploring consciousness. I mean, like I can remember as far back as like 5-6 years old, and I was having these deep existential, contemplations of the nature of reality, and like, having these non-dual realizations about, the universe and reality and, right and wrong and nature of consciousness and all these things. And so, I kind of had that inclination from the beginning, but I learned to shut that down pretty quick because, when your parents are trying to, punish you or ground you for doing something wrong, and you're sitting there saying, but there is no right and wrong. It's all subjective opinions of an objective reality. You're kind of met with resistance, and it doesn't go over too well. And so basically all that philosophical thought and, exploration didn't get me the love that we need as children. And so I learned to kind of shut that part of myself down. And I spent the next, 13 or 14 years kind of shoving that part of myself down and trying to fit in and, do all the things that people do when they're, a young adult and a teenager. And so, it never really worked, and it kind of spun me off into what could be called the dark night of the soul. And, I got into, I wasn't eating very healthy, and I wasn't taking care of myself, and I started experimenting with drugs, and that kind of got crazy, and all these things kind of compounded. So at the point when I was about 19 or 20, I just woke up one day and was like, oh my God, I don't know what my purpose is. My life isn't what I want it to be. I'm super depressed. I don't know why I'm here. I'm really frustrated. And my life wasn't working at all. And so in my seeking, I was genuinely trying to like improve my life and get better, but I was just going about it all the wrong ways. I was depressed. So everyone was like, well, why don't you go see a psychiatrist? And then, they put you on all these psychotropic drugs. Right. That didn't work. I found that out really quickly. And, I was eating really poorly, and I wasn't taking care of my body. So long story short, really amazing series of synchronous events happened where, at the height of living an unconscious life, I mean, I was doing everything that's the exact opposite of living intentionally with high degree of awareness. I was, using drugs. I was eating like crap. I wasn't taking care of my body. And at the peak of that, right, I found a book on raw foods. Somehow a book on raw foods ended up in my room. And reading that book kind of woke me up, because if you've ever read a book on raw foods, like at the beginning of the book, they always kind of like proselytize and tell you why the raw foods philosophy is the greatest thing ever. And they tell you what, all the details about how, food affects consciousness and mental health and the body and all this stuff. And so I read that, and it just clicked. I catch on to things pretty quickly. And so that clicked, and I was just like, oh my God, I've been treating my body all wrong. I've been putting synthetic chemicals in it and not eating well and not taking care of it. And then that led me to go see a naturopathic doctor. And this guy just happened to be studying with master Himalayan monks and teachers and yogis and tantric philosophers. And he just gave me all these really deep metaphysical books and, put me on a multivitamin and had me eating a vegan raw diet. And so literally in like a span of like 3 weeks, I went from being totally turned off to like meditating for an hour a day, doing yoga for an hour a day, eating an organic raw vegan diet, juicing 3 times a day. And,
wow. You didn't mess around, man. That's like such a quick transformation.
Right, totally. No, I saw the light, man, and the light was healing and personal development and spiritual growth, and I felt great. I mean, I was like floating. I swear, if someone had taken a picture of me at that time, I probably was about 2 inches off the ground. I was just blissed out. I felt amazing. Wow. It was like the exact opposite of everything I had been experiencing, all the struggle, all the suffering, and all of that, and the contrast of that experience just locked in that this was the way to everything that I wanted. Like this was it. And I kind of was like a homecoming where I kind of reconnected to, parts of myself that I had shut down when I was younger. And so that was about 12 years ago now. And pursuing that path of, raising consciousness, spiritual development, personal growth, started to lead me on down all kinds of wild rabbit holes and on to, sync up with all these amazing teachers. And basically, I had all these experiences where when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And I had really powerful mentors come into my life. And I had just an endless series of synchronicity for 12 years straight that basically led me to where I am today, running one of the top conscious media platforms, teaching flow consciousness, running trainings, getting invited to speak all over the world, and just living a magical life. And right. It was that process over the last 12 years of going deep within my own self to kind of remove anything that was distorted and preventing me from, tapping into my full potential that kind of led me here. And so now I'm basically teaching and broadcasting what I've learned and working with other people and other experts from around the world who are on this wavelength and kind of bringing their work to the forefront and our work to the forefront and doing research and all that fun stuff. So that's the long story short.
Wow, that is quite an inspiring journey for anyone who's ever sort of, how many people, sort of dabble with things. They're like, okay, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I mean, it's not too often you hear someone say, yeah, in 3 weeks, I went from, chugging 2 liters of Coca-Cola and pounding cheeseburgers 3 times a day to, such a radical change to like a raw diet. I mean, that's pretty extreme. And a lot of people would think, wasn't that really difficult for you? And it's the way you kind of tell it, it sounds like the benefits were so rapid and so profound that sort of, is that what helped you to make the transition so clean? It's like kind of like stopping smoking cigarettes, right? And one day and never looking back, which you hear people doing sometimes, but oftentimes it's like the struggle.
Yeah, no, I get you. Yeah, the fact that I immediately felt better made it a lot easier because the food that the raw food at first did not taste as good as, the Carl's Jr. and the McDonald's that I was eating for sure. But once, there's that period, which is like the make or break you part where like, the food doesn't taste that great and it's easy to kind of slip back into old habits. But if you can just get through like, I don't know what do people say, it's 21 days, right? If you can just get through that day period, like I swear my taste buds changed. And when I would eat the unhealthy food after it, I'd immediately feel bad. And like, it was just really, negative reinforcement. So once I got over that hump, it was pretty easy. And plus, these days you can indulge with raw foods. There's all kinds of, goodies and desserts and chocolates and all kinds of stuff, make it pretty easy. So.
Yes, for sure. It's definitely gotten easier, especially in, Southern California area where I'm at. And that's where you're at as well, correct? You're in Southern California? Okay.
Far north edge of Southern California and Santa Barbara.
Right. Yeah. I thought that's what I remembered. So obviously you've had quite the journey, really not that long of a time period. I mean, 12 years. I mean, on one hand, I guess it has been a minute, but you've done so much. I mean, Conscious Lifestyle Magazine, co-founder of that, and The Art of Flow is sort of your baby as well. Do you want to talk a little bit about those projects?
Yeah, definitely. So Conscious Lifestyle Magazine, to zoom into a little bit more detail from my story, when I met my first mentor, very synchronistically, we started diving deep into like these really kind of, deep, we were having these deep conversations about the nature of consciousness and, holographic reality and how consciousness affects reality and all these different things that I've been teaching now. And I was learning so much that I felt really inspired to share what I was learning. So at that time, I decided to start a website. That was, I think it was 26. So that was probably about 6 or 7 years ago now. And I decided to start a website, sharing what I was learning just for fun. And I'd never made a website. I had no idea what I was doing. And I just was inspired to do it. And so I started to publish all these articles on consciousness and reality and health and wellness and all this stuff. And that site went on to do, in its first 2 years, it got 4 million people came to the site. And it was a huge success and it was hugely influential in the space. And it was an amazing experience. And I kind of got my feet wet with publishing just as it happens. And so when that project kind of started to wind down a little bit, because I having never done this kind of thing before, I had all these visions about what I would change differently and do differently and how I could take it and make it really a globally impactful project. And so that kind of Conscious Lifestyle magazine birthed out of that. So that was kind of like my training wheels phase. And we launched Conscious Lifestyle magazine on Halloween 2013. And the intention with it is really to create the largest conscious media platform on the planet so that we can download really high-level ideas and information and wisdom and insights into the collective, because that the way that media platforms operate, is they basically, if you really think about this, they're kind of dictating what the conversation is collectively in reality, and whether or not you agree with it. The nature of how our society is set up is that the media is controlling the conversation. And so basically what we wanted to do was kind of usurp the traditional way media was being presented and instead create a meritocracy where, based on the quality of the idea and the potential that idea or that teaching or that philosophy or that story had for positive impact, that would determine what would go on the media platform. So the goal was to build a huge media platform so that we could start to control the conversation and then shift the conversation in a positive direction, so that we're basically radically shifting consciousness across huge numbers of people very quickly. And so that's the whole idea behind Conscious Lifestyle magazine. And the title's a little bit innocuous. You might think it's just another lifestyle magazine, but actually it's really it's almost like a journal where we invite all the people, the top people in their field, and people that maybe aren't super famous but have really powerful ideas to come and share their wisdom for the benefit of humanity. And so our goal with it is that every time somebody reads an article, they are actually transformed in the process. And it's not just, oh, that was an interesting, cat video. It's like, no, you have to come out a different person on the other side. And we believe that by publishing and presenting media on that level that is actually kind of rewriting the programming of society, that it's probably the fastest way that we can change the world, because we believe that things change from the inside out, and that,
absolutely.
So education is basically my bent now, and the flow training and the flow consciousness is an extension of that as well. Because it's like, if we can just rewrite our own software, if we can just reprogram ourselves to be in harmony, to come from a place of love for ourselves and others, to treat our bodies well, treat the planet well, then the problems stop. So we're kind of trying to attack it at the root level.
That makes so much sense. Yeah, it reminds me, not too long ago, maybe a few months ago, I had Waylon Lewis from Elephant Journal on. I'm sure you're probably familiar with him. Very similar kind of space, right? And I remember him talking about, I think it was one of his heroes, Lester Brown, saying the key to saving the world would be media. And how much that impacted him to do what he's doing. And so I couldn't agree, with you more on that whole perspective, both of you guys. And also you had mentioned, as far as giving anyone a voice, I love that too. And, doing this podcast, here, a year and a half or so now, I've been blessed to have some really amazing guests, a few pretty notable people that like Oprah's had on and things like that. But I just as much like having someone who is, I really never look at what you're following or how big are you or any of those things. It's like, what is it that you're talking about? What is it that you're doing? And how much do I believe it can help people, right? And who knows who the next Oprah is, to use her as an example, right? He may be some 19-year-old kid who's the first thing he ever did was this show, right? Or published on your magazine or something like that. So I think that's a really important point. And oftentimes some of the lesser known people have been the most fascinating, quite honestly. You really just, there's so many people waking up in that, as you mentioned, you were born ready. Like, how many people are born ready that haven't even gotten, that are still in diapers, right? So it's pretty fascinating time to live in, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all the people that I've really learned deeply from were not very popular necessarily. They weren't necessarily famous in the traditional sense. And so, what we found working with the magazine is sometimes people get famous and they're brilliant, and that's great. And then, but a lot of times, people just are they don't care, and they're just doing their thing in the background, and they're just changing lives and doing their thing. And it's amazing. And so, that's just the problem with traditional media is like, unless you're famous, you don't get on. And so then it's skewing things in terms of people that have learned how to hack fame versus people that are actually delivering something that's meaningful,
Right. Now, let's talk about the art of flow a little bit, because that's obviously something you hear a lot about, right? In the spiritual community consciousness realm, flowing, getting in the flow. I'd love to hear sort of your take on what exactly that means.
Yeah. So flow or flow consciousness, as me and my partner, Jackie, who's teaching it with me, what we like to differentiate flow or flow states from flow consciousness, because, it's one of those things that's kind of ambiguous, right? Everybody likes the idea of flow. Flow sounds good, feels good.
Instantly feels like, that, whatever that means.
Yeah,
I want to do it.
I want more flow, whatever it is I want. And so, we're really actually trying to define it more, because, it's being defined right now by some people as a state. And that's one end of the spectrum. Like a flow state is something that's transitory. It's something that comes and goes. It's something that, happens when you're being challenged, and then you enter into this peak state, and then it's gone. And that's a temporary thing. But what we're saying, what we're talking about flow in more of, a spiritual sense, I guess you could say, more of like a Taoist Wu Wei kind of sense, where it's like effortless action, or non-doing. So basically what we're saying is flow is a whole way of life, and it's not a transient thing. It's something that you can get into more or less permanently, when you master the art, I guess you could say. And it's something, and when we define flow as, the best definition that we've been able to come up with so far is when you're in flow, it's when everything that you want and need to be successful and to grow, giving your gift to the world, living your passion, comes to you effortlessly and in perfect synchronicity. So kind of a long run-on sentence, but that kind of encapsulates the idea. It's basically when it feels like life is conspiring in your favor, and where you're kind of just effortlessly supported, and you're not really having to work super hard or struggle, and you don't really encounter a ton of challenge other than meaningful challenges that are, really helping you to grow. And your whole life takes on that rhythm. We were joking that before, like, wow, I've done 30 or 40 podcasts this year, and I've been invited to every single one of them, because that's kind of an aspect of living in flow, is that you don't really have to go out there and hustle and struggle. It's like you show up, you give your gift, you live powerfully, and life just kind of bends around you. And so that's basically
the ultimate pronoia, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
All right. Well, now seems like a good moment to take a quick minute to tell those of you who aren't familiar a bit about our sponsor, Gaia. I've been a big fan of Gaia for many years now, which is why they're the only content provider I've ever reached out to in regards to potentially supporting the Positive Head podcast. So needless to say, I'm very excited they're now supporting the show. Gaia truly is my personal go-to source for streaming consciousness content on the web. They have an incredible 7,000 plus exclusive videos covering 5,000 years of wisdom. Just to give you an example, on May 1st on the show Wisdom Teachings, host David Wilcock explores the scientific proof of ascension, DNA activation, and how interplanetary climate change is made possible with nested spheres of energy emanating from the galaxy. I mean, it'd be pretty hard to be more up my alley, right? As you guys all constantly hear me say, it's a daily conscious effort to maintain an elevated vibration. And if you're looking to go deep down the rabbit hole to do so, then Gaia is the best place I know of to do it, period. And you can sign up for your first month for only 99 cents at gaia.com/positivehead. That's spelled GAIA.com/positivehead. Check it out. Very, very cool. So someone who is hearing this, I'm sure there's many people who are hearing this are thinking, okay, wow, that sounds absolutely amazing. That's exactly how I want to live my life. But my life is up to this point bringing me the exact opposite, right? Everything's a struggle. I'm having to hustle my butt off just to keep food on the table, or what is the sort of the high level advice? And of course, through your site, is it artofflow.com?
Yeah, that's my personal website. We're also building out flowconsciousnessinstitute.com, where we're going to have more on the background, and flow mastery as well.
Okay, cool. So obviously you go in deep with, coaching and programs to help teach this. But from a high level, I mean, as someone who's hearing this and it's like, okay, how do I get where Justin's at? I mean, I'm the exact opposite of flow. They may be thinking like, what would be your advice to someone like that?
Yeah. So there's two main aspects of flow. And once you kind of conceptually understand what they are and how they work, it starts to make more sense. And then it's like, okay, I get how this works. So the two aspects are we call inner flow and outer flow. And I'll kind of take a stab at both of them so it kind of paints this complete picture. So inner flow is basically like everything that's going on within your internal reality. And the whole way we teach flow consciousness is predicated on the idea that we are actually having an extraordinary amount of influence over our reality. We are creating our reality. And, there's been more science to back that up than ever. So it's not just, a nice new thought movement idea, Christian Science idea. It's actually being substantiated now, which is really interesting.
Right. What we talk about all the time on the daily shows here. So yeah, absolutely.
Right, exactly. So we know that that's true. So then the question becomes, well, how does it work? Right. And there's been a lot of people and a lot of books and movies and films and people talking about how this process of, creating our reality works, or what we call consciousness reality interfacing. And, what we've done that's different is taken it to a science and really done a ton of research into the nature of consciousness, how it's structured, how it works, and turn it into a science. So basically, we know that we're creating our reality. So by shifting around internal pieces of our perception, particularly our belief structures, our emotional and our emotions, we're actually able to completely shift our reality without really having to do a lot of things. Because the research that we've been doing and some of the stuff I've published earlier this year is basically showing a really direct link between your belief structures, your emotional state, and the experience that you have in your reality. And it's a little bit deeper than it's been presented before by a lot of different people. There's much more depth and breadth and nuance to it. But by playing with your belief structures, and basically what we teach people to do is how to go from limited belief structures. So basically belief structures that are creating unconscious limits in your reality, to shifting them, literally reprogramming their mind, their body, and their emotions to be unlimited. So we basically take people and reprogram them so that they're constantly perceiving reality in a way that's unlimited. And when you do that, you start thinking in alignment with that, and you start making decisions in alignment with that, and you start taking actions in alignment with that, and it literally shifts your whole reality and the whole course of your reality. Because the essence of flow in its highest form is like pure synchronicity. It's being in the right place at the right time, so the right thing that you need to thrive shows up. And the only way to do that is by aligning your whole consciousness and your whole being with flow, or with the Tao, or whatever you want to call it, whatever it's been called by any number of teachers. And so when you do that, by default, you end up in flow. So that's inner flow, is reprogramming your reality, your internal reality. Now, external flow is, what actions do you take? How do you navigate your reality, right? What do you do to get in flow? So internal flow is just setting you up. It's like setting the stage so that you're pointed in the right direction. And then external flow is a whole series of principles and distinctions and ways to take actions that are in alignment with your highest good. So those two things together will take you into flow. And even if you're experiencing a lot of struggle and a lot of challenge, it's just a result of how you've been programmed. And once you deprogram that and program in new software that is working in your favor and opening you up to infinite possibility, by default, you must then experience a reality that reflects that. So that's where we start with everybody, because it's the most important part.
Wow. Yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense to me. And I love the concept of once you're truly in, I guess the ultimate flow state, life is literally just one big synchronicity, right? You're always, and it's something, of course, I always ask questions of synchronicity on the show and of my guests, and the amount of people, even listeners on our group online, of synchronicity that happens is just so much. And of course, the more people sort of move into that state. I mean, just a little one today. I mean, every day, of course, but I was going to your site to check out a little bit of your site before we talked and take a look at what you're doing again, because it's been a few months since we scheduled this. And I saw a big quote there, and it was one that I just come across and had texted to a friend like the other day. Follow your bliss, and the universe will open doors where there were once walls. And that's essentially what we're talking about here, right? You get into that flow state. You let go of fear, and you start finding really sort of what you're born ready to do, right?
Yeah, it's super easy. Just stop being afraid. Just let go of all fear overnight, and then that's it.
Right. That's all. Yeah, I know, huh? It sounds. So says the guy who goes from like drug addict, McDonald's loving, cheeseburger eating guy to raw food yoga master, right? In a couple weeks.
Yeah.
It's easy, no big deal. Just throw the fear away. But yeah, so people who would want to sort of explore that concept fuller, they can all like check out your different programs and so forth on Art of Flow.
Yeah.
.com?
If artofflowcoaching.com, that's one-on-one coaching for people that are like want the fastest, quickest path to flow. We also do group trainings, flow mastery. We're actually doing an upcoming round at the end of January, and that's a group flow experience, which is really fun too. And we take people through the foundation. So
yeah. And you work a lot with entrepreneurs as well, right?
Yeah. I really resonate with entrepreneurs because that's been my path, and they're usually they're fun to work with because, entrepreneurs, you were saying something before, and it was the essence of it was basically like, it's that commitment to doing something, and entrepreneurs are super committed people that you can't be an entrepreneur without having to face enormous challenges and it requiring an enormous amount of commitment. So it's fun to work with people who are not, fighting everything that you're teaching them at the same time. Not that
right.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. There isn't. It's always good to have challenge and to really explore things before you integrate them. But it's like everything in life is as easy or as hard as we make it. And the more committed you are to something, the easier it becomes. And so it's really fun to work with people who are just like, all right, I get it. Like, how do I get there as fast as possible? And then their life just explodes in this new direction. So it's amazing. Right.
And one of the things that we've talked a lot about on the show, especially lately, is, as someone sort of finding their purpose, finding, how to get into that flow and where, so often the question, what am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to be? I'm not sure what my purpose is. I saw something on your site, and I can't remember exactly where, but it made me think of that because it alluded to the same concept that we've been talking a lot about lately, and that is how giving is always in some way going to tie to a person's higher purpose. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think that when you finally tap into your purpose, there's always some humanitarian aspect of it because that's kind of how it's already happening actually. If you think about it, like everyone's giving something, everyone's contributing something. When you're going to work at a job, you're giving your time, and then in exchange, the company or the boss or whatever is giving you money. So we're always giving something. It's just kind of a property of reality. We're always giving and receiving. And so I think that when you're tapped into your purpose, that you absolutely are going to be giving in some way. I mean, I think the essence of purpose is the gift that you're here to give the world. And, I don't think that necessarily means you have to be, a Martin Luther King or a Gandhi and
right.
give it to everybody. You could just be a mom, and there's nothing wrong with that. And you could just be, a caretaker for someone, and that's still a huge gift. Like you said, you don't know if the next person on your podcast is going to be the next Oprah, and you don't know if your child is going to be the next, JFK or president or whatever. So even giving a gift to one person is meaningful. But yeah, I think the essence of it is giving in service. And I think the more we give from a place of genuine abundance, the more life starts to conspire in our favor, because people naturally want to support you when you support them. And it kind of creates this feedback loop where everybody rises together. So yeah, it's a really beautiful thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So one question that I'd love to hear your sort of interpretation of is, something that you've touched on a little bit, but I'd love to just hear how you describe it. The ultimate nature of reality, as I put it. What's going on here? What is your definition of consciousness and the ultimate nature of reality in the situation in which we find ourselves?
Yeah, no big deal. Easy questions.
Yeah. I mean, isn't that no big deal? Just throw the fear away. Define everything. No big deal.
Yeah, you got it. Consciousness is elusive. I mean, I tend to lean towards the definition that consciousness is awareness, is self-awareness. And, what I find most interesting about consciousness is that, what we're learning is that consciousness is the most fundamental aspect of reality, that reality basically does not exist without consciousness. And that is so huge, because the biggest shift that you can make in life on a certain level, there's like a few fundamental shifts that I've identified that are like super integral to raising consciousness and developing, awareness and developing spiritually. And the primary one is shifting from what's taught and what's currently the collective belief, which is reality is happening to us, to we are creating reality. So instead, reality is not happening to you, you are creating reality. So that's shifting into alignment with what all the researchers are finding and all the spiritual teachers have been telling us, which is that consciousness is the causative factor in the universe. And
it's ultimately happening for you is when you really break it all the way down, right?
Right, exactly. And then the next thing is, if you're creating your reality, then life is just a reflection of your own consciousness. And then therefore everything is a feedback as to what you currently perceive and believe. And so life is really conspiring in your favor. I mean, it's objective in a sense that you're getting reflected back to you, whatever it is that you believe. And so once you realize that, then you can start to use that as a quote unquote, growth or flow hack. Because once you realize that, it's like, well, if something in my reality is unpleasant to me, or I don't like this pattern I'm in, or I don't like that thing, it's like, well, then what within me is creating that? And once you start to shift to that perspective, which is the perspective that we come at things with flow, then you can start to really play with your reality at a high level. So I think that goes back to your original question, and what consciousness is, and like how the development of consciousness actually serves us in helping us be more successful, more happy, more all these things. It's basically a mirror.
Right. Yeah, I say it all the time. I mean, that's pretty much exactly how I would describe what's going on. It is everywhere you go, you're there waiting for yourself. It's all the consciousness that animates me is the same consciousness that animates you. The separation is an elaborate illusion, essentially. And everything that you're bumping up with is in some way, shape, or form a reflection. So it just changes how you start perceiving it. Instead of it, okay, why did this person do that to me? Or why did this happen to me? It's like, how did I co-create this character appearing in my movie?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a I don't know who said this. Maybe I'll just take credit for it. I don't know. but it's like, as long as you refuse to take responsibility for something, it has power over you. Because when you blame somebody or something, or you say that's outside of my control, well, then you're relinquishing your ability to do something about it. And so I think this whole paradigm is super empowering, because it really teaches you that you're in the driver's seat. And once you really embrace that, I mean, nothing can stop you. And reality really becomes limitless. And, all the people now that we idolize in a very mainstream way, like Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, or maybe I'm just saying that because I'm an entrepreneur, Peter Diamandis, all these guys, they're just writing reality on their terms at a very high level, and they're playing at a very high level with a lot of money and a lot of resources. And, that is the paradigm I think that we're shifting into. I think for so long in human history, we've been told, no, you better fear this wrathful God. And then, that's been the dominant paradigm for the last 2,000, 3,000 or more years. And now what science and quantum physics and parapsychology and all these fields are showing us, and cellular biology are saying, like, no, actually, we're all kind of God. And so it's up to you to save yourself. You can't act by these outdated rules and expect everything to work out. It's up to you to kind of lift yourself up by the bootstraps,
Right. And, it's something that I say often, and I'd be curious to hear your sort of take on it, because it's, for some people, it can be very offensive to say, hey, there are no victims. There's never actually been a victim. And of course, I've explained myself when I make that statement, but I'd be curious if you would agree with that statement and how you would sort of answer that if someone were to say, what about the kid in, Kenya right now who's starving to death or what have you?
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great question. That's where all these different, ideas get tested, is in the extremes. And I mean, if we kind of go back to what we said before, which is that life is a reflection, it's like every experience has value. You know what I mean? It's like, I think Oprah's a great example of this. I like to tell her story, and forgive me if I'm butchering it a little bit, but the essence of her story is, she grew up in inner city in Missouri in the civil rights era, which was a very, very harsh time to be, a young African-American woman growing up in, such a racist culture. And she got raped, and she became pregnant when she was a teenager. And she grew up with a single mom in extreme poverty. And so it's like, people that haven't shifted to this viewpoint that we're espousing are saying, like, well, what's the value in suffering? Like, how is that good? Well, if you look at the bigger picture, which is what she's done with it, right? Like, she had all these traumatic experiences that require you to go on a healing path, on a healing journey, in order to not spin out into psychosis or drug abuse and all these things. When you have traumatic experiences, it really forces you onto the healing path if you want your life to get better. And so in doing that, she's then shared what she's learned, and now she's touched the lives of millions of people, perhaps even billions of people. So if she hadn't had that experience, the likelihood that she'd be doing what she's doing now is low. Perhaps it wouldn't have even happened. So the way that I like to explain it is like, nothing is ever meaningless. There's even in great suffering, we learn and we grow and we expand through that. And it's only meaningless when you don't leverage it for the insights and the lessons that it has. Everything that we experience, no matter how seemingly negative, has a positive and negative aspect. There's an inherent quality of polarity in the universe. And so there's always a positive aspect from whatever happens. You can always find a silver lining, a positive aspect for anything, no matter how dark or negative it is. And so when you learn to see that, all experiences become empowering. And so even the child suffering in Kenya, maybe that child is suffering in Kenya, and maybe it goes on its whole life and it never, that person never gets out of poverty. But, someone traveling to Kenya and seeing that child, a Westerner traveling there, might be so touched by that child's suffering that they decide to start a nonprofit and to start providing free food and medical services all over the developing world. And so even though that child's experience still had some positive impact on the world in some way, shape, or form, even if it wasn't necessarily in their own life. So everything is super interconnected, like we were saying, and every experience, no matter how dark or dreary, has some positive effect. And when we can learn to harness that, that's when the magic happens.
Yeah. Yeah, very well said. And, I think back to a few moments ago, you were talking about Steve Jobs, or, all these are as characters that are playing out on this grand scale. But really, the ability for them to do it it's just as available to you or I as it is to them. I think of a Rumi quote. It says, when you come looking for sugar, your bag will be examined to see how much it can hold, and it will be filled accordingly. Well, there are people that they had these grandiose ideas of how much, how big the bag was, right? And it's really, when you're creating your own reality like this, it's really up to you to determine these things. And it's so inspiring to see more and more people having that light bulb go off. And that's really kind of leads me to my next question. Doing what you do with the magazine and having such success with all of that and the online platform. Have you, in the years that you've been doing this, do you feel like there's sort of a spiritual awakening happening?
In the collective, do you mean?
Yeah. Have you seen a lot of growth? You said, of course, your journey started 12 years or so ago. How much do you think the world has changed, spiritually speaking, consciousness, evolving or awakening, if you will, since then?
It's expanded a ton. I mean, when I first started doing publishing in this space, 6 or 7 years ago, it was really like sifting through the weeds. I mean, you mentioned Elephant Journal. There was a couple sites that were publishing content like this in a bigger way. But I mean, there really wasn't like a place for this kind of stuff. Like, you had a bunch of small websites, small purple websites with angels and fairies all over them,
Right, exactly.
Talking about the chakras, and stuff like that. Like, and you could find things. I mean, but there wasn't like significant media. I mean, there really still isn't magazines catering to this space in a direct way. There really isn't. I mean, we're one of the first ones. 2016, we started in 2013, and we basically, when we were starting it was like, this is kind of filling a huge gaping hole in our opinion, which was like really artful, really beautiful, really deep, just kind of next level content in this space. We just didn't see anybody doing that. And so we said, well, it's a classic entrepreneurial piece of advice. If you have an idea and you feel like, oh my God, somebody totally should have done this by now, and you can't find anybody out there doing it, and it just seems such a no-brainer that this thing should exist, that's a great idea, and you should do it. And so, absolutely. So we did it, and we in that time frame, we're starting to see a lot more stuff pop up for sure. It's easier than ever to start a website. It's easier than ever to start a podcast and publish. So yes, it's expanding now, but it's still in its infancy. I mean, I truly believe that eventually the kind of things that we're talking about, this lifestyle, eating healthy, eating organic, will be a global phenomenon where it just becomes integrated into our society. And it's just taken for granted that everything is organic, because it's just, quite frankly, I think it's a matter of common sense. If you genuinely care about your development, if you genuinely care about your health, the health of the planet, this is the direction that we have to move in. It's the solutions direction. So I think it's still in its infancy, but it's gaining steam. I think people that have studied this space have said that there's, maybe between 100 and 200 million people worldwide that are kind of on this wavelength, which is a huge number, but still fraction, maybe on the order of like 1% or something, or 2% of the total global population.
Right. Yeah. And when you start to sort of, one of the things that, having been on a sort of a spiritual path myself for going on about 20 years, for the longest time, it was like, I felt like an island. I would read books and things like that. And really, I noticed such a huge shift around 2012. Whereas now I just have so many friends, and of course the show where I'm connecting with people like you. And it's like my whole world is filled with people sort of on this path. But for the longest time, it was like, I would talk about it incessantly to anyone who would listen, and it was like, okay, you're crazy, or that's very interesting, and they'd go on with their normal, quote unquote normal lives, right? So yeah, I definitely, from my perspective, my view, it is definitely a quickening happening, and certainly an exciting time to be alive. And I would say why there's so many souls sort of clamoring to incarnate in the physical dimension during this time, right?
Yeah, well said, brother.
So yeah, I mean, let's see here. One of the things that I wanted to kind of hear from you that I always am curious about, especially with someone who's got their finger on the pulse, like you do. You have a lot of articles, a lot of interesting ideas flowing through the magazine, through the site, for Conscious Lifestyle Magazine. And what is the URL for that, by the way, for people?
ConsciousLifestyleMag.com.
Okay, perfect. So lots of great stuff flowing through there, lots of content. Curious, what is there anything that you can think of in maybe the last 6 months, especially from you touched on how you really follow the scientific aspect closely, which I love to do as well, because it sort of adds it's continually adding this validation to a lot of these concepts. I like to say we're at such a wonderful time where science and spirituality are sort of doing this dance, whereas maybe a couple decades ago scientists would be like, like spirituality, like please. Now it's almost like they're becoming synonymous, right? So right. Is there anything in particular that developmentally that's happening that you're particularly excited about or can think of that you'd want to share?
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty excited about epigenetics. I'm excited about kind of getting a greater grip on how the body actually is working, how the brain is actually working, how consciousness is actually working, how what the actual nature of reality is, and also studying. There's a lot of brilliant researchers out there now doing some pretty amazing experiments, playing with how consciousness affects reality, and not just, on a kind of metaphysical level, but like how consciousness is changing physical reality, like inanimate objects. And I think that whole field is really blowing up, and all those different fields that I mentioned, they're all kind of intertwined in this really unusual and interesting way. So that's kind of what I'm most fascinated by, because I think that, some of the breakthroughs that we're going to see, not just in our space, but collectively, have to do with that. I'll give you an example. I was helping a friend out with some marketing stuff, and he just happens to be a doctor, an MD, and kind of an ND, a naturopathic doctor, who basically reads your genetic report. I went on 23andMe, which is the site which you spit in a jar and they tell you, they read your whole genetics, your entire genome. And, I sent him the raw data, and he goes in and puts it through some powerful software, and it literally spits out all this stuff telling me like how my body operates best, under what conditions it operates best, basically, what foods, what diet, what, things work for me, or what things are working against me. And it's just like, that is the cutting edge medicine. For so long.
Is his name David by chance?
His name is Brad.
Okay. Just wondering. I just met someone who is I just met someone at a event a few weeks ago, and they were talking about doing just this, taking the 23andMe data and kind of doing exactly what you're talking about. So I wonder if they work together. They might.
I've met like a group of doctors who are all loosely connected around this. So there could be a looming synchronicity there.
Right, exactly. Because I did 23andMe several years ago, and I have it sitting there and have done very little with it. So I was actually fascinated with what he was talking about, and wanted to reach out to him. Haven't yet, but so that sounds pretty intriguing when you can take get your DNA so simply broken down, and then have someone to kind of take it to the next level and analyze it, right?
Yeah,
and tell you what you should or shouldn't be doing.
Right. And so that's the first layer of interesting, right? That that there's no one size fits all anything. That's like the cutting edge of medicine. Forget it. Not everybody should be a vegan. Not everybody should eat raw. Not everybody should, like, all those ideas are just overnight invalidated. But like, that's just the first level, right? Because then people go in, well, so this is my genetic profile. The danger in that is like that, you believe that you're locked into that, because science of epigenetics is showing that even though you may have a genetic imprint, you can actually change that. And so that adds a whole nother layer of intrigue and interest to the whole thing.
We had Bruce Lipton on a while back talking about it, with his, of course, I'm sure you're familiar with biology of belief and everything. That's just fascinating and mind-blowing to people who believe and have always thought, oh, it's in the genes. It's like, and all of that is completely malleable, right?
Right, exactly. Which is, again, epigenetics are more writing on the wall that we're creating our reality. We're creating our internal reality, we're creating our experience of life, we're creating reality holographically. So I just think that this is all the most fascinating stuff. And it's so interesting that, like, the cutting edge is here. But when you go out in the world and talk to people about it, they're still like, I don't know if I should eat eggs. I hear that they're bad for heart disease or whatever. And it's like that gap and like catching like mainstream consciousness in the world up with where this is, I think, is the most fascinating aspect. I'm so excited to see how the world changes as these ideas are filtered down and we spread them with the platform and put them in a sexy package so that it's not some abstract scientific study. Like, this is what I'm fascinated about. I want to like empower people and like, we need to get this out there,
Yeah. Well, you're doing it, man. You're doing it. It's super inspiring what you've done, and I can only imagine all the good things that are going to come. Now, one of the things that we've touched on a few times throughout is you mentioned synchronicity and so forth, and that's one of sort of my go-tos on the show. I love hearing stories of synchronicity or serendipity or a positive paranormal event, let's say. You got anything like that that comes to mind that was sort of rocked your world at some point?
No, nothing ever, actually. No.
Just boring humdrum. Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I don't know. I've heard about that, but I've never experienced it. No, I think my favorite one, I was kind of doing some reflecting at the end of the year here in 2016. 2016 was an amazing year. And so for me, I was just kind of reflecting like what some of the highlights were. And I think my favorite synchronicity from 2016 in the sea of them that happened was, so maybe, oh gosh, when would this have been? I went in October, so this must have been in like May or June. So I was meditating one day in May or June, and I went really deep. I mean, I was about like 20 minutes in, and I just felt like my body, like my consciousness was like at the edges of my body, at the edges of reality. I mean, I just was so dialed in. It was one of the deepest meditations I've ever had. And I was able to kind of dance this line where I was able to start having thoughts without knocking myself out of that state. Because a lot of times that's what happens. You get really deep and then your mind starts chattering and then you lose it and then you're kind of back down to reality. But I was this day, and I was, developing this technique, and I was able to kind of stay there and hold thoughts without knocking myself out. So I started what ended up happening was I just started having this vision of me playing in the Mediterranean region, somewhere in Spain, Morocco area, like just like kind of playing in the ocean in the Mediterranean, playing on a boat, and just kind of exploring that region of the world. Like that was the vision that came. I just have a resonance with there. Maybe I've had past lives there or whatever you want to say. But I love that area. And so I just had this like beautiful vision of me just kind of in full HD, 1080p high def vision of me just like playing and just having a great time in that part of the world. And, it ended, and I just eventually, I kind of slipped out of that state maybe 10 minutes later, and I came back down to, reality, and I stopped meditating, but I was just like high from the experience, and it felt really good. And it was just this really, notable meditation that I'll probably always remember. And when I went to, I went about my day, and everything, it was a normal day, did some normal things, and I went to bed. So when I woke up the next morning, I turned on my phone and I looked at my messages, and this woman who I had known through some mutual friends and who had kind of fallen in love with the flow work I was doing sends me a message and goes, basically the essence of the message was this: how would you like an all expenses paid trip to Morocco in October of this year to come teach flow, hang out, and be on this retreat and play? And, and I was like, oh yeah, I'd like to do that.
Oh, wow.
So it just was like, hold the vision, and then it showed up, and within less than 15 hours. And so that was just probably one of the most amazing synchronicities that I've ever had, and kind of sent shivers down my spine. And so really been playing with that whole type of meditation and trying to develop it into science now as a result of that. And I went to Morocco and it was freaking amazing. Yeah.
Did you have the same sort of scene that was in your vision? Was there any key moment you're playing in the water and you're like, hold on, this is that moment I saw?
Well, there were some wild synchronicities that actually happened on that trip too. That trip, we didn't play in the water. No. So I feel like there's another trip that's about to show up, another all expenses paid trip to that part of the world to complete that part of the world. So
excellent. Even better.
But there was a couple really weird things that happened on that trip in a synchronous way. And like one of the ones that's standing out to me now is that we were staying at this riad in Marrakesh in the heart of the old city. And like one of the nights, this Berber musician came to play, right? And he had this really like remarkable and unique face. And they do this wild dancing with this hat, and the music's amazing. I love Berber music. It's incredible. And they came and they were playing at the riad, and it was this really great moment that we had. We're all kind of dancing and hanging out. And then they left. And then like a few days later, I'm wandering through the souks, which are it's like being in Aladdin. I mean, it's just this insane maze of alleyways and streets that are like, multiple square miles big. It's huge. And I'm like wandering down some random street, and I see the guy again, just randomly.
Oh, wow.
And, in this sea of like hundreds of thousands of people. And I was like, whoa, that's wild. And then I get back to the United States, and, right when I like a few days after I get back, I'm uploading a video from our flow program onto Vimeo, and I see this video about Morocco on the editor's choice section, which is like the best videos. And it's like this journey through Morocco, this video. And so, I'm feeling nostalgic for it. So of course I click on it.
Sure.
And I start watching this video, and it's like these people went there and like spent, probably months documenting the whole country. And sure enough, 2.5 minutes into the video, there's like a 10-second clip of this guy somewhere in the souks playing Berber music, like just some
wow.
And he's not a famous guy or anything. He's just some random guy that just like sits on the edge of the street and like plays music. And so I had like a triple synchronicity where I saw this guy in the video, and I was just like, what is going on?
All right. Well, when you run into this guy the fourth time, or when he comes and knocks on your door, the first person you're calling to come back on the show and continue the story is me.
Yeah, totally. You might have to let Aaron talk to him, but
yeah. Knowing you guys might be talking telepathic by then, so Yeah,
totally. I'll just
that's some great stories, man. And it kind of leads me to thinking of one other thing that I wanted to mention a few minutes ago and forgot, as we were talking about the science stuff. Of course, there's things that are happening, as far as teleporting, particles and some of this stuff. And I often think of, you hear about like masters like Jesus, of course, turning water to wine, and all the fish to feed so many people, taking 2 fish and turning it in to feed hundreds of people. So would you agree that that's sort of what we're going to, where as we understand the nature of consciousness, as we are learning how to manifest, where there will actually be physical manifestations, and that's what some of these stories that we've heard about from people such as Jesus, that's actually what they were doing.
Yeah, I absolutely believe that's where we're headed. I know it's where we're headed. And that's one of the things that we're playing at with the cutting edge of the flow consciousness work is how do we quit if you really think about what's happening is like, we're actually already doing this. But the thing the catch is that the time scales over which it's happening are not instant.
Right.
I might have this meditation and visualize this thing, and then it happens 15 hours later, which is fast. That's fast. But like
super fast. Yeah.
Super fast, but like But like, we're doing that all the time. Like, I had this vision for the magazine, and now I've gone about creating it, and now it's a reality. And, there's some physical effort involved, but it's happening. And, somebody had a vision, at some point for a light bulb, and now it's a real thing. So it's happening, but there's like a lot of physical effort involved and time scales involved. But what's happening is as we peer deeper and deeper into the nature of reality, we're quickening the time in which it takes these things to happen. And so that's, I think, where the cutting edge of all of this is. And I think, based on what we know from doing the research into flow and consciousness, is that the first thing that's necessary to actualize this is the belief that it's possible.
Yep.
Because if you don't believe it's possible, you won't even try. That's just one level. Yep. On another level, on a quantum holographic level, you actually will fight yourself on the quantum scale if you don't believe it's possible too, which is really interesting. So all the science is basically convincing us that it's possible. And then after that, it's just a matter of time to kind of hone in on the exact process of what it is. And, masters like Jesus or Sai Baba or John Chang or some of these other people that were able to kind of play with reality fluidly like that, they have just mastered aspects of it, and they haven't shared it for whatever reason. Maybe they're nervous about putting it in the hands of some people, but it's happening. So get ready.
Yeah, I think that the art of manifestation is really like the next great art form, and it becomes like, how good are you at manifesting, right? That's what it kind of seems like. We're in the very early stages of doing. To me, that's what it feels like. Yeah,
totally. I like that idea. I like the way you said that, and I totally agree. And I mean, maybe we have a skewed bias because we're surrounded by people that are on this wavelength all the time, and so we feel like just a matter of time if everyone gets here.
Right. If enough of us get together and talk about it enough, and don't pay attention to any of the old paradigms, it's you get any success, you create any success. Dealing with entrepreneur, as an entrepreneur myself, you've dealt a lot with entrepreneurs. I talked about from the time of being a very small child, I'm going to be a very successful entrepreneur, and then it's like getting your training wheels and kind of getting your sea legs on how to do it. It took me a long time, a lot of failures, and then next thing you know, an idea at the lowest point in my life on a friend's couch to one of the 500 and something fastest growing companies in the country a year and a half ago, and then hitting a big asteroid hit the company just as we got offered to be bought out for buku bucks, all this money, and it's just like something out of a movie. And now I'm sort of starting over with a similar I have my hand in several entrepreneurial ventures, and I know the ultimate result is inevitable success because I believe it at such a deep core of my being. And you take those losses and you make them into a part of the story. It's never over until you quit, right? And I think that's such an important piece for people to understand that, with their flow is these quote unquote losses are actually happening for you to make the story, the Oprah story, or the whatever the story is of your life.
Totally. Exactly. And, to finish the story that I told earlier, the first website that I made that kind of went bananas successful got hit by an asteroid, just like yours did. Yep. And so, and I learned what not to do. And I also created space for me to embark on a new project that was far more aligned with who I actually am and what I actually am here to do. And so, it's just everything is actually trying to help you be successful. It's just like, are you going to roll with it or are you going to fight it tooth and nail,
Yep. And I always say, you can take that apparent lump of coal, and if you see it as a lump of coal, then guess what? You got it. That's what it is. Or you can say, all right, it's a diamond in the making. What am I missing here? What does this lead to that's actually better? And in my case, I can look at my story, and a lot of that stuff for me is unfolded in the last year and a half. And where I sit right now, I could not be more optimistic, And for someone with maybe a different perspective, it would have been like, oh my gosh, 1 in 10,000 entrepreneurs ever get to the level that I was at. It's so unlikely to have a repeat or even something greater and grander, which is what I am looking at happening now. And it's just a matter of understanding all the stuff. It's like, once you understand how this game works, then it becomes just it becomes a fun game, right? Instead of something that you're constantly losing and getting beat up, and because you don't understand the rules, it can be painful.
Yeah, exactly. And the rules, most people have the viewpoint that the rules are, you got to do it this way and you got to do it that way and you got to market yourself like this. And those are the false rules. Those are like, those are the guidelines. The real rules are like what you set up for yourself internally. It's like, I'm so excited for the entrepreneurial space because that's the shift that is happening, that needs to happen in the entrepreneurial space. It's such an external, field where everyone is just like so externally focused. And it's like, no, that's what's going to rewrite.
Not out there.
Yeah. And the people, and ironically, I think Steve Jobs was basically like the canary in the coal mine because he was the guy who did acid and studied with the spiritual teachers and really went inside before he went outside. And they have the largest company in the history of mankind. So
right.
Writing's on the wall there. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think of Osho said, don't just do something, sit there. And so many people are, and of course, what's he getting at? Go within, do the inner work and the outer will reflect instead of, I know I've done my fair share and I'm sure as an entrepreneur, you've had to learn this one too. Some of us are quicker learners than others. I was slow where it's just constantly trying to, manipulate reality to bend to my will. And it's much easier to just kind of sit back and let things flow and not need anything. You can have goals, you can have aims, you can have all those things, but don't be attached to a particular result. Know that if it doesn't work the way you kind of envisioned it, that's because there's something better behind it.
Amen.
Well, Justin, this has been absolutely fascinating, my friend. I feel like I could talk to you forever. Definitely kindred spirit. And I would like to, before I ask you the last question, what is for anyone who wants to sort of continue following you and your work, and what is the best way to do so?
Yeah. Right now, best way would be to go to flowconsciousnessinstitute.com if you're interested in the flow work, or artofflowcoaching.com. You can get in touch with us either way and stay up to date. And then the magazine, consciouslifestylemag.com, you can sign up for our newsletter and just get updated on all the great stuff we're publishing. So that's the easiest way to stay in touch.
Excellent. Last question here. In 60 seconds or less, what is the meaning of life, according to Justin Faerman?
The meaning of life, according to Justin Faerman, is to never stop growing, never stop learning, to play, to have fun, to expand your consciousness, and to take it, all those things, as far as you can to the extreme edges and beyond.
Spoken like a true masterful flow artist, art of manifestation. Justin, thank you so much for taking the time, my friend, to connect. We'll definitely have to circle back around and do this again sometime.
Yeah, absolutely, Brandon. It's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's been super fun. I'm all excited and activated now.
Yeah, likewise. Me too. It's going to take me a little bit to come back down. Until next time, my friend.
Take care, my friend.
Well, everyone, that concludes this week's interview episode. If you have enjoyed this positive download from our hearts and minds to yours, please take a minute, give us a rating or review on iTunes. Since iTunes is the holy grail of all things podcasting, your good reviews help us to reach more listeners. Also, we would be extremely appreciative if you would tell your friends and family about the show. Our sincere intent with the Positive Head podcast is to spread positivity to the world because we're selfish, quite honestly. I say that jokingly, but really only halfway joking. I'm referring to the good kind of selfish based on the knowing that we all get what we give in this life, because when we give, we're actually always giving to extensions of self, since we're all really one in the same consciousness, just in different bodies. So if you want to be a good selfish along with us by helping to spread the positivity, by all means, please proceed to shout about the Positive Head podcast from your rooftop. Otherwise, As you continue on your fabulous journey in this 3D reality, be sure to remember this. As long as you ain't dead, you're already positive ahead. Journey well, everyone, and thank you for being.